Last week I made a video on the plan to officially name the overground lines, and there were some interesting comments, questions and suggestions. So much so that I thought today I'd dedicate a video to discussing some of them. So, without any ado whatsoever, let's get into it. You came up with some interesting suggestions for names, many of which had a historical basis, and here are some I rather liked. A popular suggestion for the line to Watford was the Harlequin line, which was what the line used to be called back when Network South East were running things. The line serves Harlesden and Queen's Park, and that's where the name comes from, so there is also a geographical basis for it. Several people pointed out that the East London line is only in East London for a relatively short part of its overall length, with much of it being in South or North London. 2 or 3 people suggested the Brunel line, commemorating Mark and Isambard Brunel's work building the Thames Tunnel through which the line runs. Very nice, again, historic basis for the name. The Romford to Upminster line has the nickname of the Push and Pull, and some people suggested making that official, although I liked the suggestions of Romster and Rompminster. There were various suggestions for how the lines should be represented and differentiated on the map. Some people suggested different shades of orange. I do like this, but I think the difficulty would be finding 6 shades of orange that are different enough from each other to be distinguishable, but also different enough from other colours in use on the map. You'd need shades that couldn't be confused with Bakerloo Brown, Metropolitan Crimson, Central Line Red, and Hammersmith and City Line Pink. A couple of people suggested using pastel shades as opposed to the bolder shades currently in use on the tube map. Here, I think the issue would be finding 6 of them that look different from each other at normal viewing distance, but also don't blend into the background. Quite a few people suggested keeping the orange, but in conjunction with other colours. One suggestion was to use dotted lines, alternately orange and another colour which would be used to represent the route. The other was to have an orange outline, but filled in with a colour to represent the line. Apparently they do this on the Tokyo Metro. I think these are both good suggestions. I'm marginally inclined towards the latter, if only because maps in London often use dotted bi-colour lines to represent National Rail routes. A few people said this, some thoughtfully, some scornfully, some apparently with contempt towards me personally. Don't hate me 'cause you ain't me, G. It may well cost more than £4 million. As I say, it's not really specific what the figure quoted would pay for, whether that's for the programme as a whole or merely the consultation. But I can't really work with speculative figures, and indeed people weren't commenting on speculative figures. The report said £4 million, that's what people were talking about, that's what I was working with. Yeah, this is a fair point. A lot of cities do use letters or numbers to differentiate their routes. It also occurs to me that you could use this to get even more specific with your routes, like you could call the North London line AB, with A being services to Richmond and B being services to Clapham Junction. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking that. But yeah, there is no reason why you couldn't go for a simple scheme like that, other than it's just not something we really do on the lines in London. I think it's because historically railway companies have tended to be named after the places they served, and that's a habit that we've never really quite got out of. Using letters or numbers just sounds weird to us for no real reason. Although oddly enough we're fine doing it for buses, so who knows. I don't think they would. The North London line as a name actually predates the Northern line. The North London line was built by a company that was called the North London Railway from 1853 onwards. It was their main line. It has been known, both formally and informally, as some variant on that name ever since, and there haven't, as far as I'm aware, been any calls to change it. Meanwhile, the Northern Line has only been called that since 1937, and that was originally only a placeholder name until they could think of something better. It's not the most northerly line, and in fact it's the most southern one. So really, if either is going to be renamed, it should be that Johnny-come-lately the Northern Line. A few people said this, and I'm not exactly sure what they mean by it. I mean, naming the overground lines was a pledge Khan made in his election campaign. Come to think of it, it was also a pledge he made in his 2016 election campaign. But it's something that serves a useful purpose, and it's not like it's the kind of thing that people remember someone for. I mean, it's hardly glamorous, is it? Let me put it this way, without watching my video on the subject, can you name me the MP who demanded that the Fleet Line be named the Jubilee Line? I'm going to say, probably not. I mean, this is hardly the Garden Bridge, you know? This is a very good question. I think I might do a separate video on this, because it is in many ways a similar situation, but in other ways, very different. So for now, maybe. This argument fundamentally misunderstands the way TfL is funded. TfL, unlike most metropolitan transit systems, is expected to pay for itself. The £4 million allocated to this project comes from money raised by TfL, not from central government. The system would still be called the Overground, much as all the different tube lines are still grouped together under the Underground brand. No, again, as with the Underground lines, the trains would wear Overground livery. This would not only maintain the brand identity across the entire Overground, but it would also mean that trains could be moved between lines as needed. This is another very good question. The tube map is immensely crowded, having to cram in 6 rail systems, plus the river, plus the cable car, plus zone boundaries and the little symbols and those little dotted lines between stations that are near to each other. But at the same time, it omits a lot. There are many connections that can only be made by national rail lines that don't appear on the map. There are many places that are only served by national rail lines. Why include some rail lines but not others? An argument could be made for stripping away everything that isn't a tube line. I suspect that ultimately the way forward will be interactive maps, either using touch screens at stations or relying on people's own devices displaying only such lines as are needed by the individual. But this is all speculation, verging on science fiction. So, those are some of your comments, questions, suggestions, and thoughts. I haven't covered everything. I've ignored everyone that obviously didn't watch the video before commenting. I've also not covered the comments based on jokes stolen from the Daily Express, because the only funny thing ever to come out of the Daily Express is the suggestion that it's a newspaper. All that aside, some really interesting food for thought, some of which I may expand on in future videos, so many thanks for that. I hope as ever that you enjoyed this video. Please do leave a like if you did, and subscribe for more. I'd like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your ever-generous support. You are the orange outline to my coloured infill. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.